Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll start with the acknowledgement with respect that we're meeting on the traditional territory of Lekwungen speaking peoples, and we are honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Kasapsan nations. So calling the meeting to order. You all have seen the agenda. May I have an approval of the agenda, please? With one change, we have to add the election of the chair, as this is the first meeting of the year. So approval of the agenda? Yes, Sandra? Favor? Thank you. Opposed, if any? Hearing none, call the agenda approved. How do we add the election of the chair here, Marcy?
Thank you. So we'll do chair of the election right now. As long as the committee is, or sorry, the commission is happy with the way it is, a possible motion would be that Ken Johnson be appointed as the Heritage Commission chair and that Sandra Hudson be appointed as the Heritage Commission vice chair. If the commission has a different way of doing it, they can put a different motion forward. Thank you.
So, anyone like to stand as chair? I'll sit another year, but this will be my last. It's getting more and more difficult for me. So, if you don't mind, this will be my last as chair.
Stays vice chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sandra. Okay, so we'll move on to the.
We just need a motion.
Oh, we need a motion to approve. All the question, all in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to the agenda. The agenda be adopted as presented. Recommended, all in favor? Opposed, if any? None. Thank you. Moving on to adoption of the past minutes meetings. The meeting of July 10th, 2025. Minutes have been circulated. And I need a motion that the minutes be adopted as presented. So moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed, if any? None. Thank you. And there is no public participation here, I don't believe. No public present. Activity reports from the members. Anything? You're hearing none. We move on to new business. The cemetery management plan. So is this being presented by someone, Marcy?
Well, I'll start with it, if that's okay.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, thank you, through the chair. So the purpose of the report that's on the agenda is to present the cemetery management plan for Colwood Pioneer Cemetery and St. John the Baptist Church and Cemetery. And we're also looking to seek the Heritage Commission's recommendation to council to endorse the plan. Development of a donation policy and preparation of financial analysis to support the long-term maintenance. My apologies. So just for a bit of background, so in June of 2024, Colwood Council approved $115,000 to develop the cemetery management plan. LeMay Heritage Consultants were retained through a request for proposal process in late 2024. The project team included specialists in heritage, engineering, landscape architecture, structural engineering, and The plan also provides a living document to guide both short and long-term stewardship of the cemeteries and the heritage church building. So a little overview on the plan. The cemetery management plan establishes a long-term vision for the sites as a respectful, sustainable, and accessible community space. It balances heritage conservation with ecological health and community use, and it aligns with Colwood's strategic priorities to strengthen the community, sustain nature, and invest in our infrastructure. Some of the key recommendations that have come out of the report include conservation and maintenance with a phased monument and fence repairs, drainage improvements, vegetation, and management of the Garry Oak ecosystem there. Some site enhancements include improved pathways, signage, seating, landscaping, and the shade of the trees. For infrastructure, they looked at expanded burial areas, green burial options, columbariums, and scattering gardens. For operations, they've got maintenance standards, digital mapping, and improved record keeping. And for sustainability and accessibility, they've got native plantings, barrier-free access, stormwater, and ecological management. As well, there is sections with community engagement that would include volunteer programs, heritage tours, and educational materials. Along with that, donation guidelines to ensure that its relevance, compatibility, provenance, reversibility, and the management of maintenance impacts. So the official community plan supports the protection of our historic assets in collaboration with the Heritage Commission. Under the Cemetery Management Bylaw 1790, Council is the Board of Trustees, and myself, the Director of Corporate Services, is the Cemetery Administrator. Some financial considerations is the plan outlines short term, which is 1 to 3 years, and a long term of 3 to 10 years for our maintenance priorities. Just to let you know, a dedicated reserve fund exists for St. John the Baptist and Emery Hall, and the plan identifies potential revenue generating options to support ongoing maintenance. So the initial report that I put out had some key milestones, and the dates have changed a little bit because we missed it on the last commission meeting. So we've got the review of the draft plan before you tonight or today. We're hoping that we'll have something from the Heritage Commission to put forward to Council at their February 9th Council meeting. And we're hoping to bring back something in Q2 of 2026 regarding the financial analysis. And we're looking to do like a volunteer cemetery cleanup for Q3 2026. So just in conclusion, the cemetery management plan provides a comprehensive roadmap for preserving, enhancing our two of Colwood's most significant heritage landscapes. And it offers practical and community-informed strategies for conservation, operations, sustainability, and future growth, and supporting the long-term dignity and resilience of these culturally important sites. We have Mark Chambers, who is our prime consultant from LeMay, along with Ellen Odegaard from LeMay online, should you have any questions. And I'm going to pass it over to Mark to just give a little overview on the work that they did on this plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcy. And thank you to Chair Johnson and the Heritage Commission. Ellen, if you have the presentation, if you could share the... And Marcy did a wonderful job of summarizing the cemetery management plan. So we would just like to hit a few of the highlights to describe to the commission what the process was. As Marcy mentioned, we were engaged in late 2024 and got underway in earnest through 2025 in developing the cemetery management plan. Next slide, please. So we put together a team, as Marcy mentioned. We addressed the architecture, site planning, the architecture of St. John the Baptist Church, and we engaged MDI Landscape from Victoria to look at the native vegetation and make recommendations. We engaged McElhaney from Victoria also to do a site survey which had not been done or was not comprehensive in terms of locating property lines, fences, vegetation, various headstones and monuments and so on. We also managed the work of Bartlett tree experts to do a thorough analysis of all the trees on site. We started by looking at the historic context of Colwood and the cemetery sites. We assessed these sites so that we could develop an analysis and therefore make recommendations as to what would be an appropriate operations and maintenance strategy going forward. There were already statements of significance on the two cemeteries. However, they did not include character defining elements. So we expanded on the statements of significance as well as identified the character defining elements of the two cemeteries and the church. And there are a number of appendices at the end of the document. Next slide, please. So looking at the timeline, the cemeteries are nearly as old as Colwood itself. The development of Colwood going back to the mid-1800s with the Colwood Pioneer Cemetery following just a few decades afterward. So it's been a significant site in Colwood for well over 100 years. And as St. John the Baptist Church emerged adjacent to the Pioneer Cemetery, and then St. John the Baptist Cemetery emerged, they became managed in the 1920s by the Colwood Women's Institute, and in the 90s, the city of Colwood assumed management of the cemeteries and the church. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, there was not really an appropriate site survey done, so we had McElhaney survey the sites, which included the two cemeteries, St. John the Baptist Church Cemetery, as well as Pioneer Cemetery. There had been some excellent reports done by Mr. Townsend and others a couple of decades ago, and that information was still very relevant. However, we wanted to identify any additions or any changes to the cemeteries in terms of new interments and confirm the locations and conditions of the earliest and later additions of grave sites. Next slide, please. So in that analysis, and we used the previous numbering system for the graves so that it didn't lead to confusion going from a previous document to the current document. And then we added annotations for more recent changes to the cemeteries. We also wanted to identify where all the trees were, which were significant, which needed work, and where there were open areas that could accommodate future expansion. We can see that St. John the Baptist Church Cemetery is nearly full. There are minimal spaces available for ground plaques, but there is space in Pioneer Cemetery. So the use of that open space will require considerable input and thoughtful input from the Commission as well as the City of Colwood. Next slide, please. So the conditions we found at Pioneer Cemetery were quite varied. This is a remarkable cemetery in that it is a relatively natural environment. We were there, one of our trips was during the wildflower blooming, and it was actually extraordinary sight to behold. With the mature Gary Oaks and the space between the various grave sites was quite remarkable. And the conditions we found varied significantly. On the right, the image is a timber curbed gravesite. The timbers are being reclaimed by the earth. They're deteriorating. And at some point, there will be no record left except on the site plan. In some cases, within the curb is just grass, and in other cases, it was concrete. And a lot of that has been through ground upheaval, has been deteriorating. Next slide, please. For the most part, in Pioneer Cemetery, to a large extent, the ledgers are either concrete or stone, and the curbs are either concrete or stone. Very few are timber. In many cases, the curbs have been due to upheaval, frost heave, or settlement, differential settlement of the soil. The stone curbs and corner blocks have become displaced. And for the most part, most of the elements are covered with vegetation, moss, lichen, and environmental deterioration. While the moss looks to be give the cemetery quite an archaic and antiquated appearance, the moss and other vegetation can cause damage to the concrete and stone by leaching minerals out of the materials. And then when they grow in the joints, they can start to pop the joints apart. Next slide, please. When we come to St. John the Baptist Church, it is much more manicured, mostly due to the fact that it is lawn around most of the grave sites and is more easily maintained. However, there are areas where there are natural or wildflowers growing as well. And the plan of maintenance has been to leave those till they go to seed, and then further grass cutting can happen. At Pioneer Cemetery or St. John Baptist Cemetery, the ledgers also are subject to this invasion of mosses and lichen and vegetation, which again, while it looks quite appealing, it does significant damage to the stone and the concrete materials. Next slide, please. Where we have headstones, often they have they're leaning, whether it's a monument, a headstone, a cross, a Calvary cross. There's a lot of leaning due to differential settlement, in some cases where there might be some frost heave. And the stone and concrete materials often get crack, and spaces open up in these cracks, especially for vegetation, and then that exacerbates the condition. Where cracks, and we've made in our recommendations where they're stable and not further risk of deterioration, they could be left as is, but we've made recommendations when they become displaced or the lean becomes risk to the material or to public safety, then we've made recommendations for intervention. Next slide, please. With respect to St. John the Baptist Church, the building is in very good condition, I would say, from foundation all the way up through the floor systems, the walls, and the roof. One item that we've pointed out, which requires immediate attention, would be the vegetation growing on the roof. While moss, again, can make it look appealing from an architectural or a historic perspective, that kind of vegetation on a roof and on stone and brick does not do any service to the building. It traps moisture, and root systems from trees growing on the roof can start to do damage, go underneath the shingles, cause water ingress, and then leach minerals out of the mortar joints in the brick chimney, as well as start to spall joints apart and cause damage. And at grade, where water is allowed to pool, moss and lichen and so on grow. And this is not doing any service to the brick or the mortar. Next slide, please. The interior of the church is remarkable, with the fir floors in very good condition, the cedar wall cladding and cedar ceiling boards and rafters, open rafters, are really lovely. And the bell tower is in good condition as well. There's some indication of moisture ingress, whether that was prior to the recent re-roofing or whether that is due to the fact of wind-driven rain getting up between the joints in the clapboard siding on the exterior or through the vents. However, when we visited, it was dry and the material looks in good condition. The original, well, the bell that was donated by the Dunsmuir family is extant, and it's lovely to hear it peal. Next slide, please. So statements of significance, as I mentioned, they did exist for the two cemeteries and the church, but we expanded them by adding character-defining elements. And why that's significant is that when it comes to maintenance and any kind of modifications or interventions, it's important to refer to the character-defining elements to ensure that they're not being impacted in a negative way, that any intervention is going to supplement, enhance the character-defining elements of the two cemetery assets as well as the church. Next slide, please. Recommendations. We've made a series, as Marcy mentioned, there are short-term and long-term maintenance. And certainly it's about maintaining the heritage value of the three assets. And we did a complete analysis, grave by grave and right through the building in terms of the major elements and what our recommendations for maintenance are for those in the short term as well as the long term. We also made guidelines for donations. This can be a kind of a sticky issue in terms of there are a lot of good-willed people who want to do the right thing for the assets. But we wanted to make sure that the standards and guidelines for the conservation of historic places is observed, as well as the statements of significance are referred to, so that an appropriate donation can be made, whether it's a bench, signage, a gateway, or whatever it might be. We developed intervention strategies as well. We looked at preventive care, which is probably the most important. If something looks to be amiss or needs some attention, it's good to do that as soon as possible to prevent deterioration. And then stabilization, say where a monument or a headstone is starting to lean, stabilize that with utilizing minimal intervention. And then restoration in a compatible sort of way. If a piece is missing or so deteriorated, it has to be replaced. Do it within a compatible framework. And we also looked at records management and monument tracking. So we made a recommendation for digital tracking and maintenance of the three assets. And that could be done in a variety of ways, but what is really critical is that the records are tracked on a regular basis so that we don't end up with great gaps in records. Next slide, please. One other item we looked at there's a plan in the document that looks at opportunities for expansion. And it appears that it would be mostly within Pioneer Cemetery where there is some open space. And this could be done in a variety of ways, columbaria ideas or scattering gardens or things like that, which could make use of the relative minimal space between some of the significant trees and accommodating the slopes within Pioneer Cemetery. So that is a real brief summary of the cemetery management plan, and we would be open to any questions that you may have. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Would any members of the Heritage Commission have any questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, yeah,
Hi. I thought that was a fantastic presentation, and I really enjoyed reviewing your over 200-page document. Seems like a very thorough, well, it is a very thorough approach you've taken. So I would say, I'm just curious, were there certain elements of heritage that you discovered that were particularly new? I'm just curious about that element, and if there's any kind of indigenous elements within the site that we need to be aware of.
Thanks for the question. Yeah, very, it was remarkable. Now, I'll just preface it by saying I grew up in a small town in southern Alberta where it was the first Northwest Mounted Police settlement. So, and I've spent a lot of time at the cemeteries outside of my hometown where the original monuments were wood. That was what was readily available. And they did not hold up that well. They deteriorated. So it was interesting to see in Pioneer Cemetery where wood curbs had been used around, say, just a grass ledger or a concrete ledger, and where the materials really started to disappear and they were reclaimed by the earth in essence. Other cases, there was really no marking. There was just which would have been done early on before there was either the resources to define the gravesite, and it would only be visible at the surface of the earth either as a depression or a bit of a mound, depending on how old it was and what the grounds conditions were over time. So that was very interesting. And without actually creating a record of what is there, much of that would be lost and would be very difficult to establish what kind of, where grave sites were, who was there, and so on. We didn't come across any potential indigenous interment here or involvement on the land per se in these particular sites. So in that regard, it didn't appear that there would be that level of sensitivity where you would have to stop and do a full assessment and analysis to see if there were, say, any ancient burial grounds. So there was, from what we found, there was no record of that. McElhaney also did the site drainage, and they have very extensive experience through this area where there's a high level of drainage. They did not have any knowledge of previous archaeological digs or historic burial sites in this area.
Thank you.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Josh, you have a question?
I do, and thank you very much for the presentation. It's very informative. I also loved reading the report, and thank you for it. I had a couple of questions. One is around whether the principle of natural deterioration is something that's consistent in old cemeteries like this. I always thought it was a bit strange that someone could get a plot of land and have it almost forever. I don't have any information about how other cemeteries operate. So I'd just be curious to know where we sit in relation to some other old cemeteries with that. And the other is around the guidelines for donations, particularly as signage. I recall the last time we discussed this as a commission, there was a potential gift on offer about a sign for the Pioneer Cemetery. I don't know if that ever got installed or what, but I think having some criteria for donations is probably a good idea. But I am just curious what happened with that sign that was donated.
I can't respond to the sign question. Perhaps Marcy can address that. However, just in terms of deterioration of materials, and the standards and guidelines for the Historic Conservation of Places in Canada addresses that. And there are cases where you would leave something to become a ruin and eventually it would be completely reclaimed by the earth. And we've addressed not necessarily cemeteries, but buildings, say in Dawson City, where the environment is so hostile, it's very difficult to maintain buildings unless they're occupied and require extensive energy. And so the case of a timber curb around a gravesite, and this could be a philosophical discussion that the Heritage Commission takes on and makes a statement on, or takes a position on. Providing there's a fulsome record of what is there, then one could argue that the material should be allowed to deteriorate. But now, is that prejudice against timber as opposed to stone? Because stone is going to last for thousands of years. It'll deteriorate, but it will hold up much better than timber will, especially in a very wet environment where it's in contact with the earth. So the other philosophical thought is that periodically you replace those elements with materials that maybe are weathered already, that are reclaimed from somewhere else, to identify that position in the graveyard or in the cemetery. And that could be recorded as part of your ongoing maintenance. So that this timber was replaced on a certain date, and then that could be monitored over time. And it may be unfair to those grave sites which do have timber ledgers or timber curbs right beside one that is in granite, which is going to last for thousands of years. So it's going to require a different maintenance approach, but also perhaps a different philosophical approach. And just with respect to donations, we tried to keep it, we know there's a sensitivity around that issue in Colwood and elsewhere generally, but we wanted to make recommendations as to what could be communicated to potential donors such that they can either donate financially, or if they're going to donate an actual object, that it fit within a certain set of parameters. We did talk about signage on the sites and wanted to keep it to a minimum so it doesn't become cluttered. The beauty of the two cemeteries are the actual monuments, the vegetation, the ledgers, the fencing, the perimeters, the adjacency of the two cemeteries. Those are the really critical aspects of the cemeteries. And there are other ways of addressing signage, which could be digital. We discussed QR codes and things like that, whereby people on a walking tour could be listening to a podcast that's talking about the cemetery, and it could be guided in that way, and that would alleviate the requirement for signage.
I thank you. Councillor Olson?
Here we go. We did it. Thank you. Through the chair, just to echo Josh's comment with respect to donations, we know that free assets are rarely ever free, so it would be really good to have a clear understanding of what happens after a donation is accepted by the city. Who has the ongoing maintenance costs? Does the donation come with conditions or recognition requests? And who ultimately carries the long-term maintenance liability when a donation has been accepted. That would be great to get a clear understanding of that. I think bottom line, I think this is a really good draft plan. And I think that, it shifts the city from reactive maintenance to more of a strategic asset management, reducing heritage risk, and creates clarity for staff, for council, and for the public. So I appreciate the 200 pages and all of the work that went into this plan. But again, I think that this commission would love to have a clear understanding of, again, what happens with those donations after they've been accepted, what that process is. So it'd be great to have that clearly outlined. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Jenny?
Yeah, I just want to go back to Josh's question about that potential donation that we discussed. I don't know, maybe over a year ago now, and what happened with that.
I'm going to actually defer that over to our manager of public works. John Russell's in attendance right now, and he can answer those questions for you.
Thank you, through the chair. When we brought the budget request for this project forward, there was also the consideration for council to look at the donation. And so we were given the direction to work with the community member and install that. So that occurred in fall of 2024. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Don, your volume isn't working.
Yeah, your sound isn't working properly, Dawn. It sounds like a voice changer on your voice. No, it's not working. If you have a question, you might be able to type it into us.
No, that's to no avail. You are an ultra contra soprano. And go ahead, Jenny.
Sorry, it's just further clarification on the donation. My very poor recollection of our last meeting was that we were asking council, the city, to defer any installation of this potential monument until this cemetery management plan had been completed, because of our concerns that it didn't match the cemetery sort of look and feel. I'm just confused about how it went ahead, or it's just my misrecollection. I don't know.
We have before us a staff recommendation. Let's proceed with that. So I'm waiting for an answer to a question. I'm sorry.
Well, this one sec. Through the chair, we're just looking at the original recommendation just to get the direction here. And that's a great question. I remember looking back here at the text of the recommendation at the meeting. It was to be deferred, but the signage did end up being installed, and so we'll have to do a little bit of investigation just to answer that question fully, just how that transpired. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. So I just went into the minutes for that meeting, which was June 24th, 2024, through the chair. The council resolution that was ultimately carried. So the commission did submit recommendation to council to defer that. The carried motion was that the installation of the wood signage donated by Mr. Aubrey not be deferred. And that was the carried motion by council. So that would explain why it ultimately was installed. So that's what happened there.
Okay. Now, would I have a motion to okay. So we have a staff recommendation that the Heritage Commission consider recommending to council that the cemetery management plan be endorsed by council and that staff be requested to return with a donation policy outlining all requests for donations for these heritage sites to be reviewed and approved through the Colwood Heritage Commission. And further, that staff shall return with a financial analysis to support ongoing and future maintenance of the site. May I have someone move that, please? Misty, move it, seconded by Sandra. Any questions? Any questions? All in favor? Opposed, if any? The motion is carried. Thank you. There being no further business, I move for adjournment. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Marcy.
Sorry, I just wanted to let the commission know that our next scheduled meeting was supposed to be in February, and because we're having this special meeting today, the next one won't be scheduled until May the 14th, unless we have a reason to call a special meeting. That will be the next one that's being held, just for your information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcy. Motion to adjourn, please. So
sorry to
moved.
interrupt. Marcy Lalande, I'm not sure if you're able to hear me. This is recording secretary.
Yes.
Hi, yes, I got a message from Dawn Lavelle. I'm not
Okay.
sure if we're still able to have a answer to that.
I don't have the question. I didn't receive
I
it.
do have it here.
Do you mind is
Yes.
that okay? Thank you. Go
Through the
ahead,
chair.
Tiffany, please. Thank you.
Are there grave sites available at the cemetery? Who administers new burials? And if columbarium is installed, who would administer?
Thank you. Thank you, Tiffany. And sorry, Dawn, because I probably won't be able to hear what you have to say. But so the cemetery is maintained through us. So any of the interments are done through the city of Colwood. I deal with them on average. It's probably 2 interments on average a year. The only sites that are available on Colwood Pioneer Cemetery is the Peat family who donated the land originally. Those are the full burial sites that are left, but it's just for them, so they're completely reserved. As for the existing sites, it's dependent on the site, but for a full burial plot, we can inter up to 2 sets of cremated remains. So we do interments into existing sites, but it has to be people that are already in there. So same thing with St. John's. There's no more available sites there. The part of the bylaw says that the only ones that can be entered there in St. John's is people that were formerly part of that church or the management committee that originated to restore this site. Other than that, I think so if it goes to adding any other capabilities, that would be going through the city of Colwood. And we are maintained through the consumer protection branch that checks in, and we report all of the interments that go into the site. I hope that answers all your questions. You can just give me a nod if it does. Oh, lovely. Thank you.
So I'm still looking for a motion to adjourn. Motion carried. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody online.
Thanks very much, everyone. Bye for
Bye.
now.